Well, everybody, happy Wednesday and welcome to another episode of Level Up Live. And this one's going to be an interesting one today. I'll share why in a couple of seconds. But I'm here with my good friend, Kenneth Edmonds. How are you, Ken?
Well, I've had better weeks, but right now everything's okay. I
Yeah,
am I am at least high and dry.
well, that's good. And we're going to talk about that because one of your favorite things, I'm going to start with this actually, which is where are you watching from? Anyone that's tuned in, let us know where you're watching from in the comments section. But Ken, I'm going to get you to start today because you are in Florida. Please talk.
Yes, and it's really interesting. Two days ago, the track of this hurricane was way north, and I was going to shelter in place because my home is a mobile home, and it's not where there's water. So I'm like, okay, life's going to be good. I'll just stay right here. And then the track changed, and right now I just looked this morning. It's forecast to pass within about 5 miles of where my mobile home is. So yesterday we bugged out, headed to South Florida. So I am in a Holiday Inn by the airport at where am I? Fort Lauderdale. And think for a minute.
Well,
And
the important thing is you're safe, buddy, and I appreciate that you took the time to get out of Dodge, as they say.
yeah, this is not one to mess with. I was watching one of the weather things, and they said that this has the potential to be one of the top five hurricanes to hit the U.S. in history. So you put it in the order of Camille and Katrina, and
Yeah, and we just had. So I'm, from Canada, so I'm
yeah,
broadcasting from Canada, and we just had our own run-in with Hurricane. Weekend. So that was the Hurricane Fiona. It landed as a Category 4, and man, I'm telling you, if you look at pictures of the devastation and Prince Edward Island along certain parts of Nova Scotia and everything else. So for any of our viewers that might be in that area, we're thinking of you in Florida. Make sure you really pay attention to this one. Stay safe. Do what Ken's doing. Just make sure you're in a space which is less likely to be impacted. So
yeah,
and
it was funny because the one thing that they did have nearby here is they had several tornadoes that in one of the outer bands. It didn't affect us. It wasn't close to us, but that prognosis farther north is not good at all for lots of things.
that is crazy. So we're thinking of you, and we're hoping that you take the advice of your local government folks and others to find high and dry ground to get through this thing. So anyways, glad you're safe, Ken. And for everyone else out there, make sure you let us know where you're watching from. If you're watching from Florida, if you're watching from some other part of the world, because Ken, we do get people that come in from the United Arab Emirates, for example, right?
Yeah, we do. I am guessing our buddy Greg Walters, who's here twice. We're getting Greg in stereo. I am betting he is still in Michigan. Let's see. Am I right, Greg?
Yeah. So for everyone that's tuned in, you can see Greg Walters double fisting here, watching us on YouTube and also on LinkedIn. And for everyone else, still in Michigan. For everyone else that's out there, if you're watching us on LinkedIn, YouTube, or Facebook, you can use the same comment section that you always use when you're replying to a poster forum as you're watching, and we'll get it and we'll share it. So please make sure that you join the conversation with your comments. It's always a lot more fun. We can see what people are thinking, what they're up to, and what their thoughts are. And I'm just going to hide this banner for a sec so we can talk about the topic today. And Ken, as you saw, we're going to talk about the 5 tips for after an attack. And this is such a hot topic lately because it's only getting worse, right? That these threat actors and the impact that they're having on businesses of all sizes, don't fall for the mythology that you think you're too small to be impacted. I met a couple of folks that are MSPs. One was smaller, and they were impacted pretty heavily. And so today's session really is going to be an amalgamation of interviews that we've done with experts and other things that have been written. And I'm going to actually bring one up as we go through these here. 1 second while I try and share my screen. Oh, hello. See your wife going through the frame there. Let's see here. I'm going to share my screen. Here we go. All right. And TigerPod just put out this blog. You're going to want to check it out. If you go to tigerpod.com, I know the URL is a bit long, but you can actually, Ken, I'm not sure if you can put it in the comments, but tigerpod.com/blog. It's a fresh one, so you're going to see it right at the top, listed with the other resources. And we're going to talk through, some of these items that are here today. And like I said, shout out, so be coming forth to some other folks that we've talked to help us get to this list. And you can see it live for yourself. So there's 5 critical items to help you after an attack. And Ken, I know, we see a lot of content which talks about cybersecurity offerings. We see a lot of content about the different types of, threats that are out there, but very seldom do we actually talk about the problems of once the actual, attack has occurred, right?
Okay, and I'm going to go off script for just 1 second. And we talked about this in the show a little while back. But if you have equipment that touches somebody's network, which is going to be pretty much everybody, I am going to say this, and I get on these. I get on my soapbox quite often because of my passion for things. But I do believe that you need to have, and all of your senior managers need to have, available to you at all times in your possession, a checklist of the things to do in case a breach occurs on your network, on something that might touch. Yeah, thank you. On your customers' networks, anytime there's an exposure. Because if you don't have a checklist and the steps written out really clearly, you're going to miss stuff. And missing stuff in this arena can be hugely damaging for your company.
Yeah, and it's actually one of the points that we, thrown in here, right? And, if it's an IRP or an incident response plan, right, to be able to have those in place. And I love what you say. If you have any piece of equipment on that network, gone are the days when you could say, well, we don't do cybersecurity. We only do network management. We manage the, the devices. Well, I got news for you. If somehow an intrusion gets through one of those devices that you are managing on that network, you are in the cybersecurity business, whether you like it or not, because you're going to be in a lot of trouble if basically personally identifiable information somehow is accessed because of something that happened with your equipment, right? So that's my rant. Maybe I'll write that down. Let's see here, West's rant. And actually, it said we're going to do some shout outs, right? And this is from a conversation that I actually had with Matt Lee over at PAX 8. And he was really talking about this, that the lines had become so blurred between what MSPs do, what MSSPs do. I was interviewing someone else that said there's basically 7 different flavors of MSPs now. But Ken, I think this is office equipment dealers as well, right? That if they have printers and copiers on that network, they are in the data business.
I agree 100%. And while the device itself may be less prone to attack, most of the manufacturers are really good about trying to secure it. There's a couple of other things that could happen that could be a problem. So, for example, if you do remote management, so if you have the ability to log into a customer's network to access a device to make adjustments, changes, check status, that is a potential risk that you need to be aware of and think about. If if you're doing any kind of other activity on a customer's network, if your technician goes in and connects to the customer's network with his laptop, all of these are things that are potential risks. They're not high level risks, but you need to have a plan just in case. It doesn't cost you that much time and effort to have a plan, and not having a plan could cost you your business.
It's absolutely right. And, as we're kind of on this, we're starting here, right? So, basically an incident response plan, basically, and this is something that I actually got from an interview with Blair Dawson, and she was actually on our program here earlier in the month, right?
Yeah.
Is that these things should be printed out, keep them in the trunk of your car, keep them, in lots of places. The digital copy should be encrypted so that people can't get access to it and understand exactly how you're going to deal with what they're doing to you. And really important to get that thing done. And then to role play, right? So I'm a big fan of, sort of geek references, right? Tabletop it, man. Like, play it like a game. Make sure that you're actually on a regular basis going through that incident response plan and coming up with scenarios because they're all going to be different. We'll talk about that in one of the other points. Yeah. And, there's disaster recovery plans as well that have nothing to do with an incident. And Ken, you've spoken about that in the past, right? That, having a DRP is just as important as having an incident response plan, right?
Oh, I agree 100%. And they kind of merge together in that, so you think about, and you shouldn't have pulled that by chain on that one, because I have a few things to say there too. But you need to have and sit down as a management team, and these are team exercises to think about what are the things that could happen that would cause a problem for our company, and what are we going to do about it? And I'll give you one really simple one to think about. You walk up to your building tomorrow and it's burned to the ground. Does every manager in your company have a plan that tells them exactly what they should do, who they should notify, and how do you get your infrastructure and all of the pieces started? And this is one thing that most people would probably not have is, okay, so you just lost all of your parts inventory. You have all of your customers out there that are going to need service. You probably should contact your manufacturer and start getting some parts emergency shipped to you, and plus contact any of your neighboring dealers that you have friendly relationships with and say, hey, listen, if I need something, can I get some help here?
And that should be in the plan. Like that should all
exactly.
Be right. So let's say you mentioned, the building burning down. A very harsh reality right now is there's going to be a lot of folks in Florida, a lot of businesses that are not going to have power for some time, right? What's the plan for that? Do you have that in your, disaster recovery plan? Right? I think it's absolutely critical. So, yeah.
Okay. And so now that brings me to two things that I want to talk about, again, associated with the disaster recovery plan. Because not only do you need one, you need to encourage your customers to have one. And I do see that as a business opportunity for dealers. But you think about how many copiers with, and we'll just talk about Tampa or actually it's going to go a little bit south. I was just looking that I've got the computer spinning on I couldn't see exactly. Sure. A little bit south. They're talking about places that are going to have 20 feet of storm surge on top of high tide. Now, if you're a dealer in that area, you need to look at all of your customers in that area and think about, what am I going to do to help my customers? What's my immediate plan to try to help these people get back up and running? The second piece of it is, how am I going to attack my competition's customers that are maybe don't have a good plan? Because there's going to be dealers out there that are not going to know what to do, how to get their phones transferred, that don't have a plan in place. And that's going to open up some business opportunities for those that did. Did I lose you, Wes?
No, I've got myself muted. I was just saying that you can head over to hurricanes.gov /#Ian. You can see it on the screen to be able to check for that, right? But this is like a perfect example of what can happen, right? And certainly anywhere that you live where these things could be, a possibility, that it's super important to have a plan in place. Because Ken, if it was, you or and I, like you run your business, I run mine, for all the other, folks out there that run their businesses that maybe in their head have a good idea of how they deal with it. What if you can't be there, right? Like what if it has to go down to someone else on the team to be able to take care of that? And that is exactly the same with an incident response plan, for any cybersecurity threats, right? Is that everyone on the team, you got to understand who that team is. You got to keep it tight. That's one of the other recommendations that I've gotten from a lot of people. Have a good core tight team that deals with these situations, and make sure that you can hand it off to any of those team members, right, to be able to quarterback it through, right?
Okay, and so let's go back. Let's go back to that piece of it a little bit too. So that means that all of these team members that are on this, let's call it an IRT, incident response team. Okay, first of all, every one of them needs to have the skill set so that they can pick up and go with the ball, because we don't know what else may have happened in the interim. The second piece of it is they need to have the phone numbers, and the cell phone numbers of the contacts for people that they need to be, that are early in the plan. I know we're going to step through the stages of it, but if you just get a voicemail at 3 a.m. and your world is falling apart, that's not good.
Right.
So you need to have a really solid list of phone numbers and extensions where possible, or cell phone numbers, so that you can get a hold of the people you need to talk to start putting things together.
Absolutely. And hey, folks, remember, let us know where you're watching from if you've tuned in, and also make sure to join the conversation with your comments. And as we've been talking about, Florida is obviously pretty big on everyone's minds today. So if you're there, be safe. I know for those that may be tuned in late, Ken is actually in Florida. He's moved to a different part of the state to be able to avoid the biggest part of the impact. Take it seriously and be careful. And so back to cyber threats. The number one piece of advice, and I love when we had Blair Dawson on for McDonald Hopkins, that's the first thing she said, both when when we had her on the show and when I saw her speak at CompTIA. And for those that aren't familiar with the carrier word, it is basically the insurance company or the actuary that's taking care of cybersecurity incidents, right? And they'll have a litany of other people. So this needs to be in your incident response plan, who that person is. And that absolutely has to be the first person that you contact. So if something happens, you have an incident, contacting your carrier is absolutely number one, because they will get the ball moving in all the right directions for everyone else that has to get involved, right? So you've got enough to deal with, understanding that you're in that situation. Your carrier is going to have a lot of, really good experience having dealt with these things. It might be your first time going through some kind of incident like this, but it's not theirs.
Yeah, and I'll make two quick comments. If you didn't know what carrier meant in this context, you need to make sure you have one. If you don't have one, you need to make sure you have one. Yeah. Because the potential liability is way beyond anything you probably carry in typical coverage.
Yeah. And unfortunately, Ken, this is one that's on, people's get-to list, right? They're like, yeah, I know that I've got to, look for a carrier. I've got to, start thinking about this. It's on the to-do list somewhere, down the pile, right? And unfortunately, far too often, the first time people contact a carrier is once they've actually started going through an incident, right? So don't let that be you. Number two is a fun one, which is don't contact the media. They'll figure it out well enough on their own, right? Because what you don't want to do is create a sensationalized story that gets out of your control. And messaging is absolutely critical, right? To make sure. And your carrier, again, will help you with this. The legal counsel they give you. So if it's, somebody like Blair Dawson over at McDonald Hopkins, they'll help you understand who you should contact, how to respond to the media, those kind of things, right? And Ken, we see it so much, and I'd especially say, and I'm not, believe me, I'm not political, but one thing I can say is most of our, media stuff now is politicized, right? That they're looking for a story, and they want to inject and inflate things. Every news program now has 10 experts, right? Ken, you've seen that, where they come in and talk about it. It's not really news; it's just kind of an opinion panel, and that's really the direction, in my opinion, where the media has gone. They're not really trying to tell a story with 5 bullet points. They're trying to, get it, messed and flurried up for, more comments and controversy, right?
Yeah, and I would say this too is, you said that the media would find out soon enough. So this is a piece of your incident response plan.
Absolutely.
What do you say to the media? And in most cases, like I said, your carrier will help you work through this. But if you don't know, the answer is no comment.
Right.
Don't say anything until you've had it vetted by your legal representative, and or because your carrier is going to have legal help for you.
Yeah.
Make sure that anything that comes out of your mouth or any manager's mouth, any employee's mouth, is what it is correct, because if you say the wrong words, you could automatically say, hey, I'm liable. And
Yeah,
that's not a place you want to go.
it's not. And so don't contact the media. Just that'll happen when it happens, but you certainly don't need to be proactive there. Now, here's one, Ken, that you do have to be proactive on, and it's number 3, which is understanding the state-by-state reporting requirements, right? And so if you're doing business in multiple states, they all have different requirements for understanding exactly what they require, when they require you to report an incident, right? And I'll just go back to the to the blog here. Just going to put that back up on my screen because we actually do have some links in the content for people to be able to figure out where that is. There's a link for the National Conference of State Legislatures in the blog right here, and that'll take you to a place where you can understand sort of what the different state requirements and stuff are. And it's funny that speaking with people on multiple fronts, they said, yeah, it gets even more complicated if you're dealing in other countries, right? That they're going to have different requirements for incident response as well. And so again, this has to be in your incident response plan. You need to know right away what those requirements are. So that should be detailed. It's got to be in there so that people can act on it. You do not want to be going to that link that I showed in the blog post on the day of the incident. Like, have an understanding of what all that looks like so you can get ahead of that, right?
And you got to make just along those same lines, you got to make sure you understand what the time frame is.
Yeah.
Because if you have 6 hours, then that obviously changes the priority compared to you have an hour to make your initial report. So again, as we think through our IRP, it has to be the order of priority. Okay, what do we do first, second, third, fourth?
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing, it's Ken, you go on about this all the time, and you train people on this, is business planning, right? That, far too often we don't even have a business plan in place, let alone an incident response plan. But in this day and age, when we're dealing with, things that could be personally identifiable information through to a breach or a hack or a ransomware or some other kind of incident, it's absolutely critical that we understand, what that is, right? Number 4. Start data mining ASAP. And again, I'm going to go back to this one. If you've contacted your carrier, they probably have folks on their team which will help you starting to do this, especially for the forensic data that you're looking for, right? So data mining to understand if there was any personally identifiable information that's been compromised, and then doing some forensics on the data to find out what actually happened, right? Those are absolutely critical. But again, if you did this, you will be doing this.
Well, and that's one of the things that Blair said when she talked about is that they help new clients work through this process of building out the plan. Because these are not necessarily things that you even have, let me phrase it. I want to be careful. I don't want to say you don't have the skill set, but let's just say that these are things that having experts that know exactly what to do can help you work through this process much quicker, much easier, and much better than you might in your own, on your own.
Yeah, agreed. And I don't think it's bad to say that it's not in your skill set, right? Because if you don't have the experience, then you don't have that skill set, and these people do, right? So absolutely. Yeah, and that's got to start right away, because the sooner you start mining that data, the sooner you understand how you have to respond. And the sooner you get to the root cause of what happened in the first place, right? Number 5, this is one, and Ken, I loved it because you were just very careful with your words. You just said, well, I shouldn't say that it's not in their skill sets, but and words are important, right? And certainly this is another conversation that we had with Blair, and I loved how she said it. It's not that we don't use words like hacked or breach or ransom or whatever, but until we know what happened, those words can't be used. And working with someone, legal counsel, to get you through that is going to make sure that you know when to use those words, right? And heaven forbid that in the communication you decide to put out on your own without working with your carrier and without working with legal counsel, sending a blast email out to your customers saying that we're going to take care of this, this hack, we've been breached, we don't know what happened yet. Like, no, like those kind of things are again, when we get back to these folks here, the minute you say, hacked or breached or anything else, somebody's going to get that out there, and here's where it's going to go. And again, it's not that you don't use some of those words, but you are going to be very careful with those words and use them when your carrier and your legal counsel say that it's appropriate, if it's appropriate, right?
Yeah.
So, I know, for example, I was talking with actually a partner of ours in the top 100 who stated after, we kind of did one of the legal calls and said, it's so funny, not 5 minutes after that call, we had an incident. And of course, they went into their incident response plan. And as it turns out, the only incident was a connectivity issue within the office, right? It wasn't anything. But nonetheless, they had to do that research. Could you imagine if they would have sent something out to their customers saying that we've had an incident, we're not sure what it is yet, and, we'll get back to you. Meanwhile, it's just their internet connection, like internally. So you just never know. Sometimes it's actually going to be good news and not bad news, right? So be careful with those words. And I can't think for those that are out there watching us, join the conversation. Are there words that we didn't mention? Breach, hack, intrusion, ransom. What other kinds of words do you think we have to be careful with? And I'll just even throw this up for fun. Is there a word that you would like to share? A word for the day, even if it's not security related.
Well, and I wanted to touch on one thing, because this again goes back to IRP and DRP, disaster response plan. So if you're still on a server-based ERP system and somebody locks up your server, what is your plan? Because you have minutes now to start trying to get back up where you can take care of your customers. Yeah, it's possible that none of your technicians have access to their calls. Where are we? What do we need to do? What are the parts? We have so many things that if our system got locked up, the same would be true if something happened in a cloud-based platform that you're using. So there are just so many of these things to think about. And
yeah.
You say, okay, what's the worst thing that could happen? And then how do we protect ourselves? What's the next worst thing? And when you get down to it, it's going to rain tomorrow. You can probably stop.
I love that you mentioned this, on-prem stuff, right? Because obviously, TigerPro, we've got a lot of on-prem customers, but any new customers are being moved automatically over to the TigerPaw Unleashed, right? Which is the cloud-based version. And speaking with Matt Lee at Pax8, they work with a lot of customers on the security side. They're doing either Office 365, et cetera, right? That's their area. But they work with a lot of MSPs that are still managing Exchange servers, right? So if it's your legacy ERP or if it's your legacy, email server or whatever, maybe that's a part of your planning, is to try and make sure that you get out of that tech debt, right? And into a more cloud-based solution where, yes, there are still situations where you're going to be vulnerable, but it's going to be easier for you to understand what happened, right? Because that's going to be the same for everybody on that cloud platform. So that'd be my argument. If you think I'm wrong, let us know in the comments, either before or after the program. Do you think that moving into a cloud-based ERP or moving your email from an Exchange-based server to an Office 365 server leaves you less vulnerable or more vulnerable? Folks I talk to say less vulnerable, and the threats are more understood. Because, Ken, as you know as well as I do, server-based installs are the patches up to date. They have the latest version of the software. What kind of, accompanying software platforms, if they're using, heaven forbid, some kind of JavaScript or some other, legacy thing in their software that's on their server that could be impacting them, right? And the problem with that is, with threat actors, once it happens, you talk about the forensics we talked about when you're doing the data mining. It's a lot harder when you've got your own infrastructure, right?
And it's interesting because what you just triggered something else. If you have a public-facing website that stores cookies or other customer information, okay, yeah, there you go. So you have a vulnerability. You have something that you need to protect. And again, if that information gets compromised, or if there's a possibility it might have been compromised, what's your plan?
Yes.
What's your plan? What's your plan?
And in respect for everyone's time, we are coming down on the half hour here. And so I did want to say the bonus was, we talked about this create and or revise an IRP. The other thing I want to do, I'm just going to share my screen because I do have Blair's information up here. She's been so generous with her time, both with us, Ken, and with a group that I lead, the Top 100, and lots of others. And here's where you can find her on LinkedIn, at least, Blair-Dawson. And she's phenomenal. And I would encourage folks to at least have a conversation, start to look at getting that kind of representation, before the unthinkable happens, right? Because I know that's, you think people are late to get a carrier, they're way late to get, some kind of legal advice until they actually need it, right? So be proactive there. The last one I'll throw out there is visit the tigerpod.com blog. And if you do that, then you can actually, I'll go back and you can, see the page as it is. We've actually got it right up front and center. It's right over here. So you can actually just click on that. The most current content is at the top. It is there now. And we got lots of other, great stuff for you to see there. Yeah. So Ken, I'm glad you're safe, and I want to, make sure that you stay safe. And for everyone else out there that's watching you from Florida, we're thinking of you. You got our prayers, and make sure you take action. Get yourself safe. This is not something to mess with. I've seen the damage. I've heard the stories from my family. I've got about 53 or 54 family members that live on the East Coast, and be safe. And there you go. Greg says Blair is going to be on his show on 10/13 as well. And that's actually probably a good final thing. I love starting to see people do some of these live streams. So Greg Walters has one. You can check him out on LinkedIn to be able to find some details on that. And I'm certainly looking forward to seeing that as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, Greg always has some great insight as well. He's been a guest a couple of times on our show, and we always appreciate it.
Always. So until next time, everybody, remember, keep learning. Thank you.
Bye.